Hello, I'm Herm Gailey here with my friend Shannon Flaharty. Shannon's 20 years old and I've known her for 21 years. That tells you a little something. She is riding her mare Ducky. Ducky's a 5-year-old mare. She is by Terry and Peg Helder's nice stallion Rock Solid Hobby, and out of a daughter of Duckhorn, who was a wonderful thoroughbred mare. So this mare is half thoroughbred. Shannon got this filly at 5 months old. She's now 5 years old, and she's done 99% of the work herself with some assistance from her dad, some assistance from me. But the pick and shovel work has been done by Shannon. She's the one who showed up for work almost every day and got this mare to where she is. So what we're not really going to be doing is fixing anything that's wrong today. We're just going to be extending some things and exploring some new things. This filly here is a 5-year-old also. She's a filly that I bought from my friend Frank Granich out of his Good Stallion Rooster Suggs. She's a pretty talented filly. She's probably not as far along as she should be. She's a mare, and I'm still calling her a filly. That tells you something right there. So today what we're going to work on initially is the side pass and the leg yield, which in my view leads to the side pass. So I'm first going to sort of demonstrate my process, and then we'll see where Shannon and Ducky are in their journey through that process. Full disclosure, we had one previous session with Ducky and Shannon on this subject, and we found some holes that needed to be plugged, and that would have been good watching, but I have a bad habit of realizing there's a good segment right when what happened. So this is follow-up, and I'm sure we'll find some things to do. So the first thing I'm going to say about this mare is she has been part of the way through my program that leads to the side pass. I go about it a little differently from what most people do. Typically, you'll see folks ride up to a fence, sort of box their horse in on the fence, move them over with their legs, and use that fence to restrain them. I go about it slightly differently, and I'm not saying that the way I do is better, but it works better for me. And that is, I get to the side pass through the leg yield. Of course, you want to have your basics solid on your horse, and I always will go back and harp on those basics. You want your horse ready to move off your leg, prompt. You want them soft in the bridle, and you want them to not just go forward off your legs, but to have some feel so that you can move them around without having to thump on them. So those things are in place on this mare. And as you get into the leg yield, which she's been through, those buttons only help. So I'm going to come down this diagonal over here. And what I'll do to start the leg yield is to pick up. If I'm going to go to the right, pick up with my left rein, put my left leg into her, not overbend her, but ask her to shift over. And if she moves a step or two, that's fine. Move a step or two, that's fine. Go forward afterwards. The reason I like to work through the leg yield is it incorporates forward motion. The problem I have with just going to the fence and kind of jamming your horse over sideways is that when you do that, you're sort of teaching your horse a circus trick. It's not part of a longer continuum of things. Plus, you've got the fence built into it, and that's a crutch that you may not want or need later on. So you can see from the back, the same thing I was showing from the front. Left leg in, left rein activated, step over to the right. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. And you'll take that to the next level and begin doing that from a trot. And this mare is just getting good at it, so I'm not expecting her to be perfect, but she's really not doing badly. And she's not being belligerent. She's remaining forward. soft in the bridle and responsive to my legs. In the leg yield and the side pass, you want to be able to move your horse over with your leg hanging where it naturally hangs. You can correct by going back to back, move the shoulder over if you need to by going further forward. But ideally, you don't want to be moving your leg around. You just want to move their rib cage over. And if their rib cage moves over, guess what? Their legs are going to follow. And this may be a little bit unfair to this filly, this mare, but also take this up a notch and move your horse over. Whoa, whoa, that wasn't too shiny. Move your horse over at a lope the same way you did at a walk and a trot. Now, let's suppose your horse is stiff in the bridle and they're a little slow to catch on. Especially their stiffer way, because they're all going to have a softer way and a stiffer way. I'll bend my horse down and get them in a bent, relaxed position, but make sure they're going forward. And get them to where that's almost as tight as you can walk around. So going any further into that circle, any shorter, is going to be difficult. But the easy answer is you put that, in this case, right leg into them, and they should shift to the left. They will be willing to shift to the left because it's the easiest escape for them. It's the release that we've all been taught to teach our horse to crave. So we put that right leg on. Now, on the side pass, or the leg yield in this case, there are two ways you can use your leg. If your horse is a little apprehensive, I'll press. And this filly's real feely, so she'll move off that press. But a horse will have a natural tendency to push back against that steadier pressure. So your option is to go bump, bump, bump. Nothing there to lean on, so your horse will move sideways without leaning on your leg. And you can add steps as you go until in a surprisingly short time, your horse is going to be willing to move sideways in a bent position about as far as you want to. Then I always like to use my other leg and say, remember, you're not supposed to always run through your shoulder. You can still steer into a circle, because sometimes they'll use that against you and run through it. Now, that's the leg yield. A very general description of the leg yield and how you get it. The side pass, interestingly enough, is not a classical dressage maneuver. You'll never see a dressage test that incorporates the leg yield. Other disciplines have said, let's take the leg yield, let's take the half pass and kind of blend them and have a horse that stays relatively straight, hopefully maybe completely straight, and moves sideways. Now, disclosure on this, I have not done this with this mare before. So let's see what we've got. If I say to her, okay, you know how to move off my leg, you know how to give to my hand, you know how to move sideways. What if I say, don't move forward? Pick up on her, collect her, and move a couple steps. That's the beginning of that. And she is saying, aren't I supposed to go forward? And I, without being confrontational, say, no, that's not what I'm after now. You need to move sideways. Couple of steps. You need to move sideways. And I'm looking down at my tracks and she's leaking forward a tiny bit, but not bad. That's kind of what you're after, is having your horse to where they'll move sideways when you want them to. The worst thing and the hardest thing to correct is if your horse falls backward. But if you get there through the leg yield, you've got that forward motion in the bank. So when you go sideways, they're far less likely to go backward because you want that crossover with the front legs, and maybe we can get the camera on it. I'll move up here again. You want that crossover to always be with, in this case, the left front leg crossing over the right front leg. If they cross behind, you're not making progress, you're creating a problem. So that's the method. Now, we're gonna let Shannon kind of experiment a little bit, maybe come down that same line I was riding and ask her filly to step over and see what she's got. We're gonna do a little evaluation, and then we'll decide what we might do to advance her a little bit. So I'm gonna step out of the way. I'll probably keep talking. And you just go and ride that same little line that seems to pick up pretty well on camera. Tell me which direction in advance, so I know you're not cheating. Okay. You're gonna go to the right, okay? Now Shannon just made a smart choice. She's gonna leg yield her horse to the right. Now pan over there, Kim, if you will. Show why that's a smart choice. The horse trailer's parked to the right. I think Shannon thought of that. That's okay. Right now, that's a magnet that we can use. And it's a form of cheating. I love cheating when you can find something that lets you do it. And this lets you cheat just a little. And then as she gets more advanced, of course you leg yield her away. There you go. So she's starting to shift sideways. Now, I'll play back what you say on camera. Where would you criticize that, if anywhere?
How do you mean?
In other words, what do you think we could correct that would make that a little bit better?
She's a little sluggish. Could use some more forward, and her hips are still
slow.
A little behind.
So what Shannon said, which you couldn't hear, was she's a little sluggish in moving off the leg, and she also is slower with the hip. The hip is behind the shoulder. And ideally, you want this to be a completely parallel movement. Both those things are completely accurate. So what I'd say is take her up there, and for correctional purposes, when you start her, almost lead with the hip. Because if you have to play catch up with the hip, it's a lot harder. And we'll just keep going to the right, because I have a habit of demonstrating one direction and letting people use their imagination the other way. By the way, this video goes out on request from my old friend Jody Oldhauser, who asked about hints to advance her side pass. And hopefully this will give her maybe a little different approach, particularly if maybe she'd been doing the against the fence routine. So yep, there you go. And that's enough. If she leads with the hip, there, see what's happening that wasn't happening before is she's crossing over with her hind legs as well as her front legs. Yeah. So that's what you want exactly, is you want her to cross over with both sets of legs pretty much simultaneously. Now just loop around and do the same thing away from the camera. Okay. And we can sort of get a hind view. And do it to the, we'll keep you honest, we'll make you do it to the right again. Okay. This time it's away from your magnet. So just turn right around and come back on that same line. Yeah, so you may be able to see on camera, she's still a little sluggish with the hip. So shift that leg back. There you go. Now one thing you can do if you have one that is pretty sluggish like she is on the hip, you can take her down like so and activate that hind end alone and move that around to where you get more isolated movement with that hind foot, and then when you go back to doing the leg yield, it's going to be kind of fixed with that more elementary move. So why don't you try that with her? Just tip her nose around to the left, move your leg back pretty far, and see if you can get her there, stepping her. There you go. There you go. And put that left leg in and get her stepping, crossing over with her with her hind legs. There you go, that's good. Yep, and you did the right thing, you moved her out before she started to shrink back. So go ahead, maybe on the line toward the camera, and see if she will lead with her hip just a little bit more. What will really happen is you will try to lead with the hip. You probably won't get it done, but if you're trying to get the hip the whole way in advance, you'll probably get it equal with the front end. There you go, I can see a change there. Yep, I can see a change there. And importantly, what we're not doing is saying, but it's not perfect. It's not. It doesn't need to be perfect today. It needs to progress today. So that's a good start toward getting her to activate that hip, maybe be a little more forward, and maybe we'll do a separate little deal with getting her a little more forward. But for right now, why don't you put her in a left circle, and then we'll yield her out to the right as we've been doing from that tight little circle.
Okay.
See how that helps her.
How big of a circle?
As small as you can make it. And what you want is to be making a quality circle, which she's doing well, where they're not falling in, they're not taking their nose to the outside, they're not bulging to the outside, they're just following their head. Make it tight enough that it's almost uncomfortable.
Okay.
And keep her going forward. Now put that left leg into her when you're ready and see if she'll just take a step to the right. There you go, and I would release. So if you watch that carefully, because it's subtle at first, she gave a couple of nice little steps. So do the same thing. Yep, and you may want to reach back a little and make her move her hip a little bit more than she is, because she's pretty devoted to the idea of using her front end first. There you go, there you go. That's success. And even though there'd be no harm in continuing to do this for demonstration purposes, that kind of shows what we're after. We're gaining control of this horse from the tip of her nose to the back of her tail. And that's what's nice about the side pass and the leg yield. Now let's do something. You've side passed her a bit, right?
Yes.
But you've done that more in the traditional way.
Yeah.
Why don't we take her up then and sort of line up like I did with Sweetie here and see how she side passes to the right.
Okay.
So we'll just line up there and see if she will give you a nice forward side pass without actually moving forward. That sounds like a contradiction, but it isn't. So she's a little leaky there. Now I wouldn't back her. It was the right move not to back her. I would just activate my leg a little more. And even if she leaks forward, it's even more important that she steps sideways. The more sideways motion you get, it'll be easier to take the forward out of her. Bump, bump, bump. Don't. There you go. There you go. Now stop. Stop. If she was falling back, I'd say drive forward. Because she's wanting to go forward, I'd just say stop.
Okay.
That's her sort of reward. Now just make a tiny little loop here to where you're back in the middle of the camera angle and do that another time. Bump, bump, bump. Okay, so what you've got there is half a side pass. And that's okay for today. Surprisingly quickly, she'll get a full side pass available to her, but don't try to fix that in the side pass. Fix it in the leg yield and get her really good off your leg in the leg yield. And then the next time you come back, this will be your diagnosis.
Okay.
This will be your diagnostic test to see if she's moving off your leg the way you want and if you can move all of those body parts exactly where you want them. This will help with so many things, practical things like opening a gate, obviously, having control of your horse's whole body and keeping their shoulders upright, keeping them between the reins, teaching a horse to turn around. You've already got them to where they're starting to do this with their front end and cross over. and you can stabilize their back end. It gains you control of the hip so that when you move on to a lead change and you activate your leg to change leads, they're going to move their hip over instead of just falling in. So the side pass and the leg yield are both very useful exercises, both in their own right and to tie into other things you may be doing with your horse. Shannon, thank you. That was good. I wish we'd had the first session, which was ugly but interesting, but I bet you're glad we didn't. Okay, so that'll be our episode for this week. Come back and see us again.